Your home looks beautiful, everything in its place, soft lighting, a vase of stunning flowers in the corner catching the sun just right. But here's the twist. Those flowers aren't real. And energetically, that matters more than you think. Because in Feng Shui, beauty is not the only metric. Energy is. And that seemingly perfect bouquet might be doing more harm than good. This isn't about being picky, it's about being intentional. Feng Shui teaches us that everything in our space, every object, every placement, every material, either supports our life force or suppresses it. Flowers are no exception. They're not just decor, they're conductors of qi, living symbols of growth, movement, and potential. But when the flowers are artificial, something changes. The room may still look vibrant, but under the surface, the energy becomes quiet, still in the wrong kind of way. Let's step into this together. Today on New Day Mindfulness, we're diving into the secret energetic lives of artificial flowers. When are they harmless? When do they actually block abundance, peace, or love? And if you do choose to keep them, how can you activate their presence so they don't work against you? This might sound subtle, but subtle is where energy lives. Now, before we get deeper into the reasons why your home might feel off, even when it looks perfect on the outside, I want to ask for something small that helps us share wisdom with a wider community. If this kind of insight sparks something in you, if you're curious about how ancient traditions meet modern design, please take just a second to give this video a like, a share, and a gentle tap on that subscribe button. It helps New Day Mindfulness get one step closer to our next goal, 2,000 subscribers. And with your support, I can keep bringing you content that's not only beautiful, but energetically aligned with a more mindful life. Now, let's come back to those flowers. The ones that sit in your hallway, or brighten your dining table, or fill that corner that always felt a little empty. If they're artificial, their visual appeal may be strong, but energetically, they are silent. Real flowers breathe. They drink water, respond to light, follow the seasons. They carry wood element energy, which in Feng Shui is all about vitality, forward movement, and growth. That wood element isn't just metaphorical, it's the force behind your momentum, your ideas, your healing, your finances, your family. Real flowers lift that energy upward, help it move, expand, evolve. But fake flowers, they hold none of that. They look alive, but they don't live. And that contradiction creates a subtle but powerful dissonance. In the energetic world, they become placeholders of paused growth. They freeze qi rather than circulate it. They say to your subconscious, just, this is as far as we go, no further. Now, does that mean all artificial flowers are bad? Not quite. Context matters. A single beautiful silk orchid placed with intention in a space that is otherwise living and flowing can still act as a symbol of elegance. A handcrafted lotus in a sacred altar space, especially one surrounded by incense, crystals, or candlelight, may still radiate peace if it's tended to with love. But the difference is care. Real flowers ask for it naturally, they wilt, and we notice. But artificial ones, left for months in a corner collecting dust, become invisible. And it's in that invisibility that stagnation begins to form. So think about the spaces in your home. Where have you placed fake flowers? What energy did you hope to bring in? And more importantly, have those spaces changed the way you hoped they would? In today's episode, we're going to break down 3 key areas. When artificial flowers actually create energetic harm, the rare instances when they're energetically safe or even helpful, and finally, the simple rituals you can use to activate and refresh their energy if you choose to keep them. This is not about guilt, it's about awareness. In Feng Shui, energy flows where intention goes. So even if you've filled your home with the most gorgeous faux florals, there's always a way to reset their purpose. But it starts with understanding that energy doesn't just respond to how things look. It responds to how they live. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll have a clear, actionable sense of whether your flowers are breathing energy into your home or blocking it quietly beneath the surface. Now let's begin. When artificial flowers are acceptable. While the foundational principles of Feng Shui emphasize the vitality and movement of real, living plants, there are modern scenarios where the use of artificial flowers may be not only permissible, but necessary. The key lies in understanding that energy is shaped by more than form. It is shaped by context, intention, and maintenance. Artificial flowers are not automatically bad Feng Shui. They are only problematic when they become symbols of neglect, stagnation, or aesthetic pretense. Under certain circumstances, their use can be harmonized with Feng Shui principles, so long as their energetic presence is approached with care and consciousness. The first and most widely acknowledged exception involves health-based concerns. In homes where asthma, pollen allergies, or heightened respiratory sensitivities are present, real flowers may introduce genuine discomfort or even health risk. Peonies may be beautiful, but if they trigger sneezing, sinus pressure, or anxiety in a household member, their vibrational benefit is undermined by physical stress. In such spaces, artificial flowers provide a visually soothing alternative that circumvents physical reactions while still offering symbolic energy. The visual frequency of a soft pink peony or a pale orchid can still soothe the senses, even if the flower itself does not conduct qi in the same way. To optimize the effect in such cases, it is essential to use high-quality silk or fabric replicas with realistic structure and soft, non-glossy surfaces. Avoid plastic flowers, overly stylized colorations, or synthetic fragrances, all of which can introduce a sense of artificiality that disrupts harmony rather than supports it. A faux flower may not breathe, but it can still hold symbolic resonance if chosen with intention and treated with respect. Another setting where artificial flowers may be not only appropriate, but practically ideal is in sealed or low-energy environments. Conference rooms, hotel lobbies, windowless offices, or long corridors with minimal airflow and no access to sunlight are poor hosts for live flowers. In such spaces, the conditions required to support the life force of a real plant simply do not exist. Bringing in a potted orchid that quickly withers in a dim hallway, or a bouquet of fresh lilies that deteriorates in stale air, only reinforces the theme of decline. In these cases, an artificial arrangement, if designed and placed thoughtfully, can hold symbolic energy without setting up a cycle of failure. The flower then becomes a visual statement, a nod to harmony, elegance, or prosperity, rather than a qi conductor. The Feng Shui principle to honor in such cases is form and placement. Choose flowers with soft curvature, stable stems, and colors appropriate to the energetic sector they occupy. In a south-facing reception room, warm yellow or red artificial blooms can still carry fire element energy visually. In a north quarter, cool-toned silk lotus blossoms may reference water and introspection. The trick is to maintain the symbolic clarity of the arrangement, even if the flower is not physically alive. A third valid exception is found in elder care facilities, convalescent homes, or assisted living environments where the daily maintenance of live flowers may not be feasible. In these contexts, energy support becomes more about emotional symbolism than botanical activity. A vase of lifelike chrysanthemums on a bedside table, a faux peony at the entrance to a common dining area, or a silk lotus beside a reading chair can serve as visual anchors of hope, beauty, and continuity for those who may be experiencing physical limitation or memory decline. The vibrational resonance of flowers is not always about their qi movement. Sometimes it is about the emotional imprint they hold. Elderly residents may associate certain flowers with seasons of their life, spiritual traditions, or loved ones now passed. When a live flower is impractical due to watering needs, fragility, or staffing constraints, a well-chosen artificial alternative can still offer peace, dignity, and a focal point for emotional grounding. It is crucial in such settings, however, to avoid treating these flowers as permanent fixtures. Artificial florals in elder spaces must still be rotated, cleaned, and placed with ceremony, not forgotten in corners to gather dust. A dusty flower is not neutral. It quietly signals neglect. And in the energetic world, neglect is a vibration of disconnection, decay, and emotional fading. To avoid this, staff or caregivers should commit to seasonal rotation, gentle dusting, and perhaps even the occasional ritual refresh. Lighting a candle beside the flower, spraying it lightly with a natural floral mist, or setting a positive affirmation card near its base. This simple act reanimates the symbol, reminding the space that someone is paying attention, and that intention is still alive. Ultimately, the greatest mistake in Feng Shui is not the use of artificial flowers. It is the absence of energetic presence. A silk rose treated with reverence, positioned in balance with the 5 elements, and refreshed seasonally holds far more power than a real lily that has wilted, browned, and been ignored for days. Artificial flowers become problematic only when they mimic life without honoring it. When they are placed to fill a visual void, but carry no energetic purpose. When they become invisible, untouched, and forgotten. That's when they shift from decor to disruption. To prevent this, practitioners must apply the same intentionality to faux florals as they would to any energetic tool. Does this flower serve a purpose here? Is its color aligned with the sector's element? Is it clean, well-placed, and respected? If the answer is yes, then the flower, though artificial, may still serve its symbolic function. It's also important to remember that even symbolic energy needs rhythm. Artificial flowers, like art or sacred objects, benefit from ritual reactivation. This might mean wiping the petals with a soft cloth under the waxing moon, speaking an intention while placing them into their vase, or simply acknowledging their presence with gratitude during a weekly home cleansing. These acts might seem small, but in energetic terms, they reintroduce consciousness into the object's field. And in Feng Shui, consciousness is the true current behind any cure. The most inert object can become a portal of transformation if handled with clarity and care. The most beautiful object can become an energetic vacuum if abandoned emotionally. To summarize, artificial flowers are not inherently bad Feng Shui, but they must meet 3 essential conditions to be energetically acceptable. They must serve a clear purpose, they must be maintained with love and presence, and they must be chosen and placed with symbolic alignment. Their material may be synthetic, but their vibration is determined by how they are honored. In spaces where health, architecture, or daily life make live flowers unfeasible, the presence of a carefully chosen artificial bloom can still support a field of beauty, remembrance, or stability. But it must never be assumed harmless simply because it doesn't decay. The real question is not whether a flower is alive, it is whether your relationship with it is. Mistakes to avoid with fake flowers in Feng Shui. Among the most common misconceptions in Feng Shui practice is the assumption that artificial flowers, being visually pleasing and low maintenance, are harmless stand-ins for real plants. But this belief stems from a misunderstanding of what Feng Shui truly asks of us. Not just symmetry or color, but energetic alignment. In a tradition that teaches us to live in harmony with nature's rhythms, everything in our environment becomes part of the energetic conversation. And while artificial flowers may look like life, their silence often speaks louder than we realize. When misused, they don't merely fail to support your space. they can distort its frequency. Their presence, though decorative, can subtly signal stagnation, confusion, or emotional dissonance. Understanding the specific mistakes to avoid when incorporating artificial flowers isn't just a matter of good taste. It's a matter of energetic integrity. The first and most fundamental error is treating artificial flowers as if they're just decor, rather than symbolic elements within an energetic matrix. Feng Shui doesn't concern itself with whether something is expensive or trendy. It concerns itself with whether something is alive, physically, symbolically, or spiritually. A real flower wilts when neglected. It gives you a sign. But an artificial one, it doesn't complain. It just quietly sits there, gathering dust, fading in color, and turning into a visual representation of what has been forgotten. The energy it holds becomes inert, and that inertia spreads. This is particularly dangerous when fake flowers are left untouched for months on mantels, shelves, or corners where no attention lands. They become stagnant anchors, reminders of beauty that once mattered but no longer does. That vibration over time leads to stuck feelings, dulled passion, and the slow drip of unconscious disconnection from the space itself. The cure for this is not necessarily to throw the flowers out, but to interact with them, dust them, move them, reassign their purpose. Feng Shui is not anti-artificial. It is anti-abandonment. Another critical misstep is placing artificial flowers in high-energy zones where movement, vitality, or sacred flow is essential. Think of your main entrance, your prosperity corner, typically the southeast sector, or your altar space. These are not passive areas of the home. They're energetic portals. Your entrance is the mouth of qi. It welcomes life force into your environment. Your money corner channels abundance. Your altar is where intention is magnified and sent out into the ether. When artificial flowers are placed in these zones, they not only fail to circulate energy, they can stall or deflect it. In Feng Shui terms, it's akin to placing a closed door where there should be a window. These areas need breathing energy, movement, and renewal. Real plants with upward growth, fountains with trickling water, or incense that rises with fragrance are ideal. But a static bouquet of silk roses beside your front door? It doesn't invite vitality, it holds a pose. And that pose, no matter how elegant, blocks the very flow these areas are meant to encourage. If artificial flowers must be used in these spaces due to logistics, they must be meticulously tended and paired with other activating elements, such as light, sound, or scent, to counterbalance their stillness. Cluttering is another misjudged issue when it comes to faux florals, and perhaps one of the most visually overlooked. In Feng Shui, clutter is not just about mess, it's about energetic noise. A small, thoughtfully chosen floral arrangement can bring harmony. A chaotic collision of mismatched colors, textures, and sizes can energetically overwhelm a space. When artificial flowers are clustered in large bunches, especially if they clash in shade or symbolism, they create an emotional frequency of confusion. Imagine red roses, blue tulips, yellow sunflowers, and neon orchids all crammed into the same vase. Even if aesthetically pleasing to some, the vibrational impact is jarring. These color frequencies do not complement, they compete. And what results is not harmony, but visual noise that subtly stresses the nervous system. This is especially harmful in rooms that should promote stillness, reading nooks, bedrooms, or meditation spaces. The solution is curation. Less is more. A single color family, a unified container, a limited arrangement that respects the principles of simplicity and elegance always holds more energetic power than a bouquet that tries to say everything at once. Remember, the goal is not to impress the eyes, it's to soothe the spirit. Perhaps the most misunderstood mistake, and certainly the one with the most emotional weight, is placing artificial flowers in bedrooms, particularly in the space of a shared couple. The bedroom is not just a place to sleep. It is a space of intimacy, vulnerability, and restoration. It holds the energetic memory of connection, and every object within it either supports or disturbs that emotional flow. When artificial flowers are used here, they introduce a vibration that is, at its core, simulated. They mimic softness, mimic beauty, mimic life, but they do not breathe. And that symbolic dissonance can reflect and reinforce emotional patterns within the relationship. Fake flowers in a shared bedroom may unknowingly represent false intimacy, emotional detachment, or unresolved longing. They might appear romantic, but if their energy is not alive, they can act as visual metaphors for connection that isn't fully present. This doesn't mean every couple with artificial flowers in the bedroom is struggling, but it does mean the space may be subtly shaped by a static, idealized version of love rather than one that is dynamic and evolving. To realign, couples should consider replacing artificial flowers with real blooms on occasion, even simple, seasonal sprigs, to reinforce the theme of renewal and presence. If faux flowers are kept, they should be minimal, neutral in tone, and always clean. Better still, use natural elements like stones, warm lighting, soft linens, or living plants to convey love that is rooted and responsive, not manufactured. All of these mistakes stem from one root misunderstanding: that beauty alone is enough. In Feng Shui, beauty must also move, breathe, participate. An artificial flower can participate in your space, but only if it is chosen with clarity, honored with maintenance, and placed with symbolic respect. The mistake is not in the material. It is in the neglect, in the mindless placement, in the assumption that because something looks good, it must feel good. But your body knows, your space knows, and the energy you live within, whether alive or artificial, is always responding to what you choose, where you place it, and how often you notice it. The case of a celebrity's perfect room that felt off. In early 2021, Architectural Digest ran an interview with a well-known celebrity interior designer whose client list includes heads of state, fashion icons, and tech visionaries. Among the highlights of the piece was an intriguing story that revealed the subtle but potent difference between aesthetic design and energetic harmony. The designer had recently completed a project for a globally recognized tech billionaire, a man whose name is routinely featured on innovation panels, wealth rankings, and think tanks dedicated to the future of artificial intelligence. The project, a private meditation and reflection room inside his Los Angeles estate, designed to be a sanctuary of peace away from the noise of innovation in public life. Every element of the room had been meticulously crafted for visual serenity: organic textures, pale neutral tones, layered acoustics, soft lighting that mimicked candlelight. Everything seemed to glow with intentional stillness. Yet one specific request from the client stood out during the design process. He insisted that all floral elements in the space be artificial. His reasoning was, by most accounts, perfectly rational. He wanted the space to remain pristine with zero maintenance. No wilting, no water changes, no scent, just visual perfection that held indefinitely. The designer complied, sourcing ultra-premium silk orchids that were virtually indistinguishable from the real thing. Pale ivory petals, arched stems, realistic leaves. They were installed in minimalist stone planters and placed symmetrically near the alcove windows and seated meditation bench. For the first few days, the room was a success, at least on paper. The client praised its elegance. The press release photos looked flawless, yet within 3 weeks, the energy of the room began to change. Subtly at first, but noticeably to the one who spent time there. The billionaire, known for his precision and emotional control, reported feeling strangely anxious in the space. His meditation sessions became restless. His sleep quality diminished. He found himself avoiding the room altogether, describing it to his assistant not as serene, but as weirdly flat. No scent, no movement, no rhythm. The room looked tranquil, but it felt hollow. Eventually, he consulted a Feng Shui master recommended by one of his international business partners. The practitioner arrived with no pretense, no crystals or ceremony, just quiet observation and a well-trained awareness of energy patterns. After walking the space and speaking briefly with the homeowner, her diagnosis was clear and swift. The room was aesthetically flawless, but energetically inert. Everything in it existed in stillness. The colors were neutral, the textures were quiet, the lighting was dim, and most importantly, the plants, the visual anchors of vitality, were fake. The very element that was supposed to hold upward, renewing qi in the space, was in fact still and moving, synthetic. And while the human eye had been fooled by their beauty, the human body had not. The body knows when life is present, and it knows when it is being surrounded by the illusion of life. The Feng Shui master recommended a series of simple yet transformative changes. The artificial orchids were removed and replaced with slender stalks of live, lucky bamboo placed in water-filled ceramic vessels. A small tabletop fountain was introduced to the eastern wall, creating a gentle, continuous trickle that reactivated the room's stagnant air and introduced the cleansing rhythm of the water element. A single candle was swapped for a hand-poured sandalwood incense burner to subtly connect the olfactory system to memory and depth. The effect was not instantaneous, but it was undeniable. Within a week, the billionaire reported that his sleep had returned to normal. He began spending time in the room again, not out of obligation, but because it felt alive. The room had gone from looking serene to feeling sacred, and the irony wasn't lost on him. That someone whose life's work revolved around machines had unintentionally created a sanctuary that mimicked peace but lacked the one thing machines cannot reproduce: life force. This story, while anecdotal, echoes a truth that every Feng Shui practitioner has seen time and again. A beautiful room does not automatically hold good qi. A polished surface, a high-end finish, a symmetrical arrangement. All of these are visual. They please the eye, but the body, the breath, the emotional field, all of these respond to something much more primal. They respond to movement, to light, to breathe, to change. In this sense, artificial flowers, even the most exquisite ones, must be understood not by how they look, but by what they do not do. They do not release oxygen. They do not shift toward light. They do not respond to the seasons. And when placed without care, they become more than symbols of stillness. They become symbols of stagnation. What this story teaches is not that artificial flowers are inherently evil or useless, but that their use requires a deeper awareness. They can be beautiful, they can be symbolic, but when placed in spaces meant for emotional regulation, spiritual clarity, or energetic flow, their inability to participate in life becomes a liability. The billionaire's room was not suffering from a design flaw. It was suffering from a lack of participation. The energy wasn't circulating because nothing in the room was alive enough to move it. The lesson then is simple yet profound. A space without qi is like a stage without a story. You can design every detail, set every scene, align every pillow, but if the energy isn't breathing, the story never begins. In the world of Feng Shui, the living aspect of your space is not a luxury. It is the current that carries your intentions into form. It is the soil in which peace, prosperity, and clarity grow. How to activate or recharge artificial flowers, if you must use them. While Feng Shui traditionally favors the living over the lifeless, we don't live in a world that always accommodates tradition. Sometimes our needs, constraints, or environmental limitations lead us to choose the artificial over the organic. And while fake flowers may lack qi in the classical sense, they are not beyond redemption. With the right practices, artificial flowers can be symbolically activated, allowing them to participate, however modestly, in the energetic conversation of your home. But this only happens when the user takes on an active role, treating the flowers not as passive decor, but as intentional conduits. When activated properly, even the most synthetic floral arrangement can carry meaning, reflect beauty, and support subtle energetic goals. But the key word here is properly. Activation isn't a one-time fix, it is a relationship. It's a ritual that reaffirms your space is tended, your attention is present, and your energy is still in dialogue with your surroundings. The first and most fundamental method for activating artificial flowers is through spoken intention. While it may sound deceptively simple, this act is the root of all Feng Shui cures. The space doesn't need elaborate interventions. It needs clear energy, clear words, and clear presence. To activate a faux floral, hold it gently in your hands. Close your eyes for a moment and inhale slowly. Let your mind settle. Then speak aloud a clear and affirming intention that aligns with what you want this flower to represent. I invite loving connection and grace into this space. May this arrangement hold the energy of peace and emotional clarity. With this flower, I welcome prosperity into my home. The words you choose aren't nearly as important as the sincerity and specificity behind them. You are charging the object not with magic, but with meaning. And in energy work, meaning is the magnetic field that draws results. This intention-setting practice should be revisited every time you clean, move, or refresh the flower's placement. It reminds the environment and your subconscious that the object exists not by accident, but by design. The second practice is smoke cleansing. Where intention aligns the mind, smoke clears the energetic residue. Even though artificial flowers don't decay like their living counterparts, they are still energetically porous. They sit in space, absorbing the emotional frequency of conversations, anxieties, routines, and tension. Over time, they may begin to carry the stale imprint of past experiences, just like the corners of a room hold dust no one sees. To cleanse and reactivate the flower's energy field, pass it gently through the smoke of sandalwood, sage, or Palo Santo incense. If the arrangement is too large to move, walk around it slowly with the incense in hand, allowing the bone to surround and touch the petals and leaves. In doing so, you're symbolically removing the stagnation and asking the object to return to its original frequency, one of openness, clarity, and usefulness. Smoke cleansing can be done monthly or more frequently if the space experiences emotional intensity or frequent guests. While the smoke itself is subtle, its energetic effect is profound. It disrupts inertia and reinvites movement. Crystalline pairing is another technique that amplifies the vibrational field of artificial flowers, especially when they're placed in static or windowless areas. Flowers may be the centerpiece, but the crystal becomes their energetic motor. Placing a small piece of clear quartz, citrine, amethyst, or even rose quartz in the base of the vase, or hidden gently within the petals, helps raise the vibrational field around the flower, compensating for the lack of organic movement. Each crystal serves a different purpose. Clear quartz amplifies all energy and enhances clarity. Citrine boosts abundance and joy. Amethyst calms and spiritualizes the environment. Rose quartz warms emotional tones and supports healing. Choose a crystal that matches the flower's symbolic purpose in the sector of the home in which it resides. For example, in a southeast prosperity corner, a citrine stone beneath a yellow camellia bouquet can act as a silent wealth enhancer. In a southwest romance corner, pairing artificial peonies with rose quartz enhances love energy. What matters is that the arrangement becomes a mini altar, not through religious ritual, but through symbolic layering. Equally important is the act of refreshment. Even though artificial flowers do not wilt, their stillness can become energetically stale if left untouched for long periods. That's why refresh cycles are necessary, not merely to maintain visual appeal, but to sustain energetic integrity. Every week, wipe the petals gently with a cloth dampened in lightly infused water. You might add a few drops of basil water, lemon peel, or rose hydrosol. These are not only antibacterial, they carry vibrational brightness. This cleansing process removes literal dust, but also symbolically removes accumulated dullness. Once a month, move the arrangement to a slightly different location or rotate its direction, even by a few degrees. These micro movements remind the flower and your home that this object is being interacted with, that it is part of a living space. And in Feng Shui, movement creates opportunity. The more your objects are in quiet motion, the more your energy stays responsive and adaptable. Finally, perhaps the most effective method for revitalizing artificial florals is to place them in close proximity to a living element. If the flower is symbolic, the living element becomes its energetic counterpart. A flickering candle beside a faux bouquet reintroduces the fire element, giving life to stillness. A water fountain or bubbling diffuser next to a silk lotus rekindles motion and emotional release. Even a living plant, such as a nearby jade vine or bamboo stalk, can share its chi field with the artificial floral if placed with intention. This method does not pretend the flower is alive. Instead, it honors its role as an energetic mirror while allowing life to surround and animate it. In practice, this might mean placing your faux florals beside your morning incense tray or near your journal and tea in a quiet corner. The goal is not to make artificial seem real. It is to create a setting where intention, symbol, and life coexist harmoniously. Each of these methods reminds us that even synthetic objects, when chosen and maintained with care, can play a supportive role in the energy of our space, but only when we treat them with the same presence and reverence we give to living things. Feng Shui is not about hard rules, it is about relationships. And relationships, even with the quietest objects, must be kept alive through touch, through attention, through time. Final reflection. Alive or imitated, energy always responds to intention. In the quiet stillness of our homes, energy doesn't ask what's real, it asks what's remembered. Every object we place, every corner we tend to, becomes a reflection of what we care for, what we believe in, and what we allow to grow. Artificial flowers may not breathe, but they hold shape. They hold meaning, if we choose to give it. Left untouched, they become decorative ghosts, beautiful, but hollow. But when honored with attention, refreshed with intention, and paired with ritual, they transform from mimicry to metaphor. They become visual prayers, soft reminders that beauty does not only belong to the living, it belongs to the loved. Your home, like your heart, responds to presence, not perfection, not performance. Presence, and presence can be felt through the way you dust a petal, reposition a vase, or whisper a wish into the quiet before sunrise. That is the work of sacred design. It's not about what's real or fake, it's about what's alive with care. So whether you choose fresh blooms or faithful silk companions, remember, energy always responds to what you nurture. And your space, your sacred breathing space, is always listening. If this video opened a new way of seeing your environment or offered you even a small moment of clarity, I warmly invite you to stay connected. Please consider giving this video a like, sharing it with someone who may need it, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a journey to reach 2,000 mindful souls, and with your support, I can continue to create thoughtful, heart-centered content for you. In the comments, I'd love to hear your story. Have you ever used artificial flowers in your space, and did they feel energetically alive to you? Your reflections may inspire someone else's renewal, and your presence here already means more than you know.